Good morning, friends. Welcome to Dream Big Today. My name is Debbie, and this is July the 6th. So, question for you today. Have you done any of your genealogy? Do you know anything about your ancestors? Well, I know very little, I suppose. I mean, I've heard stories passed down, and I'm sure that some of the stories that I heard that was passed down to me about my ancestors might have been a little embellished here and there to make the story good, because what if you were just reading something dry that was just, here's John that had married Susie and they had Bill and Martha and all of this, and then you just read it over and over and over. But then you throw in a little thing like this one got bit by a dog and they had to cut his leg off out in the field, or this one went to war. I mean, this is this crazy stuff. But, some of the little tidbits about your history is really kind of fun to hear. If you went back to as far as you could go back to see all of the names in your line that came to you, you would probably think, oh, this is a big deal, because this is not just talking about cousins. This is the grandfather, the grandmother, grandfather, greats. And now here's you. It's always more important when it's about you, right? And so whenever we're looking at today's reading in Chronicles, 1 Chronicles 2 through 4:4, we continue on with what we started yesterday on the genealogy. And so what we have beginning in chapter 2 today is the genealogy of David. Chapter 3 that we read is the descendants of David, and then chapter 4, the first 4 verses is all we're going to do, but that begins the descendants of Judah. So what does that tell you? We're working on getting down to the main person of this whole genealogy. This tells us how God had a plan from Adam clear down to Jesus for his mission. And so when we skimmed through the names today, I thought, what if you went to Matthew 1, where it is talking about the genealogy of Jesus, and then with Chronicles, highlight the names that is in that specific order of for Jesus, to see how this fits into the stories, because man, we read so many amazing stories about the people of the Bible. Isaac, Jacob, the stories are just awesome. And then Solomon, I'm hopping in and out. There's Hezekiah. We've just recently read about him, and Manasseh. Oh my word! Look at they did evil, they did good. They did evil, they did good. They manipulated, they worshipped. There's so many different things in the genealogy of Jesus. So now, what does that make you feel like today when you think, oh, we had some really ugly things happen? Well, this is letting you know that the tide changes, and maybe today it's up to you to make that change in your family line. So at this point forward, if it wasn't a good one prior to you, it can begin today to be a good one for your descendants. And this is what we need to focus on, is what are you hoping in? The Bible is full of hope and love, and we've got to read it with that hope that we have in it. So this part covers the same time as Samuel 2. I think I mentioned that yesterday, in the reign of David, because that's where we're getting to. And we really don't even have to worry about all of the things that David did that probably wasn't quite right. Well, we know that there was a lot of things that he did that wasn't right. And so whenever we get down to this, I mean, we're just talking about David, the man that loved Jesus, that loved God, loved the Lord his God. And so just go with that today, and read and just see what you can pick out on that is gives you a connection to Jesus today. One of my little notes about it was the theme of all of this is probably Ezra was probably the author, but because it was written from a priestly point of view, many details about Judah's religion are given to supplement the history found in Kings. The stress is upon the supreme importance of worshiping God, the positive effect that has on the life of a nation. Don't you know that we need that positive effect on the nation today? The mention of so many unfamiliar names, while it seems like it's irrelevant, actually shows that God forgets no one. You can walk into a graveyard today and you can see an unnamed grave. There might be just a marker or a stone just showing that a body lies here. We don't know who it is. We don't know anything about it. But God never forgets anyone. They're all personally remembered to Him. I'm going to jump on over now. That's all I've got for Chronicles today. I want to get into Acts. Acts and Paul is so great. Don't you wish that you could be more like Paul? I don't want to go through everything that Paul went through, but would I? If I had the opportunity to help somebody, would I go to great lengths like Paul did to spread the gospel? Well, right now we see that here's the trial, and so let's get started in this. 5 days later, Ananias, the high priest, arrived with some of the Jewish elders and the lawyer Tertullus to present their case against Paul. So they traveled 60 miles to get to Caesarea to bring accusations against Paul. And it was just a bunch of lies. The presence of these three at the court indicates the seriousness the Jewish leadership was about obtaining a conviction against Paul. So, verse 2 says, when Paul was called in, Tertullus presented the charges against Paul in the following address to the governor. Now, the governor was Felix, and he became the first former slave to become a governor of the Roman province. And that's a big deal. So he had that mindset of a slave, a tortured person. And then it goes on to say, you have provided a long period of peace for us Jews with foresight have enacted reforms for us. For all of this, Your Excellency, we are very grateful to you. But I don't want to bore you, so please give me your attention for the moment. So there's a lot of flattery here. Felix didn't bring peace or prosperity to those he governed, but here they're trying to get on his good side, get his attention by bragging on him a little bit, a little flattery, a little something there to keep his attention. But I mean, what do we know about flattery? It's a sin. It's often neglected because it sounds like you're encouraging, that you're building somebody up. But when you look at Romans 16:18 and Jude 1:16, 4 different times in Proverbs, it connects flattery with the sin of sexual immorality. Many people have been seduced into immorality through simple flattery. Like, can you just imagine, oh, you look so nice, you look great, and just bragging on your appearance just to move forward with what you want? So then verse 5, we have found this man to be a troublemaker. Now, where in the world and what would you use to accuse somebody in a court of law for being a troublemaker? Oh, maybe that would be like an insurrectionist or something like that. But Paul hasn't done any of that. That's the problem. When you have nothing else to go on and you have like, oh, well, he's a troublemaker. He's a bad man. He tells stories we don't like. How does that hold up in court? He's a ringleader of a cult known as the Nazarenes, or the Way. So, and what is that? What is that? It just means that here's something else that they don't like. Troublemaker, that's vague. This cult, that's vague. It's they're followers of Jesus. So, desecrating the temple was a fabricated charge. Paul had nothing to fear from the truth, but he knew that the truth does not always win out in a court of law. And can you see that today? How many people have been charged and sent to prison on a manufactured situation? Not true, untruths. Furthermore, let's go on down. Verse 8, you can find out the truth of our accusations by examining him yourself. Then the other Jews chimed in, declaring that everything Tertullus said was true. Tertullus had preferred mob justice. That would have been so much better for him, just to say, here, just take him and beat him to death. But now he hoped that Paul would incriminate himself under the examination of Felix. So, the governor motioned for Paul to speak. And so, this is great. Paul is a smart man. He is a learned man. And you know what? It was Martin Luther said, with God, one is a majority. So he starts his speech. I know, sir, that you have been a judge of Jewish affairs for many years, so I gladly present my defense before you. What a statement. He is letting him know that he knows that he is judge of Jewish affairs. Now, just saying that alone can put him in his place. And I think that's just brilliant. You can quickly discover that I arrived in Jerusalem no more than 12 days ago to worship at the temple. My accusers never found me arguing with anyone. These men cannot prove the things that they have accused me of. Paul was happy to answer all of these questions himself, because the facts of the case was in his favor. And so Paul, unlike Tertullus, used no flattery in his address to Felix. None. And he says there's no proof. So next, Paul explains his ministry and why he was arrested. He said, I admit I follow the way. What did Jesus say? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the light. he said, they call that a cult. I worship the God of our ancestors. I firmly believe the Jewish law, which again, he told him, you judge that, and everything written by the prophets. Now, that had to have just stopped him for a minute thinking, he knows the law and he's here and he's telling me that he hasn't done anything? Man, oh man. Paul clearly states that he has not abandoned God through these next few verses. The Sadducees didn't believe in a resurrection, but Paul did. And you can read more about that in 1 Corinthians 15. But if we truly follow God, the truth and the evidence are our friends, not our accusers, just like this. In verse 19 it says, but some Jews from the province of Asia were there, and they ought to be here bringing charges if they have anything against me. Now, that was another little plug for him, because the accuser was supposed to be there. If your accuser is not there, then why are you even on trial? Verse 21, except for the one time I shouted, I am on trial before you today because I believe in the resurrection of the dead. So then, verse 22, at that point, Felix, who was quite familiar with the way, adjourned the hearing and said, wait until Lysias, the garrison commander, arrives. Then I'll decide the case. So he's a little uneasy right now. He ordered an officer to keep Paul in custody, but to give him some freedom and allow his friends to take care of him, because, see, there was nobody else that was going to come feed him, give him water, or anything like that, take care of those needs, other than friends. So let's let them take care of him until we wait on the other guy. So Felix has delayed making a decision. He had enough evidence for Paul's favor. However, he didn't want to identify himself with Paul's gospel and the Christians. His decision was to make no decision. Verse 24. A few days later, Felix came back with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish. If you look back at Drusilla's her lineage, she was part of a descendant of King Herod and all of that. So she's got a brutal background. She's probably lucky that she wasn't burned at the sacrifice. But anyway, so here she is. Sending for Paul, they listened as he told them about faith in Jesus Christ. Now this is great. Verse 25, as he reasoned with them about righteousness, self-control, and the coming day of judgment, Felix became frightened. Now, reasoned. We should be able to reason with somebody about our belief. When we reason with them, we're not arguing with them. We're not belittling them. We are making our case as Paul made a case. See, he didn't flatter anybody. He didn't talk down to anybody. He stated the facts. God was with him. He was the Spirit was in him and helping him to prove his point. But the Holy Spirit's our advocate. I mean, he goes before us. He sets the stage for us. Paul, even though he's on trial, he's safe. He's being able to speak the gospel to people that wouldn't normally hear it. He is in this crowd where everybody is listening to him talk. It's not that riot, that mob where everybody's screaming and throwing rocks and shouting and starting fires and all that kind of stuff. He's in a courtroom setting of some sort. Now then, Felix and Drusilla had left their spouses to get married to each other. So here's something that they're also a little nervous about when somebody's talking about righteousness, self-control, and the day of judgment, Felix tried to walk the middle ground. He knew Paul was innocent, yet he didn't want to identify himself with Paul's gospel or Christians. And so he became so fearful. Paul's talk to him was personal. Paul's words were interesting until he focused on that righteousness, that self-control, and that judgment. So think about this, those 3 points that you could be talking to somebody about may cause others to walk away. And that's it. Just speaking the truth will cause others to walk away. The righteousness that is ours in Jesus Christ. Go away for now, he replied. When it's more convenient, I'll call you again. I mean, he's thinking, oh, maybe he'll bribe me, or maybe he'll do something that I can stamp it illegal and we can take care of this all at once. But in a way, people like Felix and Pilate are the guiltiest of those who reject Jesus. They know what is right, but refuse to do right purely out of fear of man. They have eternally fatal lack of courage. 2 years went by in this way. Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and because Felix wanted to gain favor with the Jewish people, he left Paul in prison. Leaving Paul in prison means more prisoners will be hearing about Jesus. So some of my notes that I had on that is talking about the need for Christian ethics, self-control. Paul had said, I know what I should do, but I don't do it. And that's my rendition of that. That's a hard one to get past. Everything in our daily life requires prayer and help from the Holy Spirit to get from this point to the next point. And so eternal accountability before God. He's talking about the judgment to come. And so what do we know about judgment? Jesus is the judge. Everyone will be judged. The great white judgment is only for the wicked at the end of the age. You can read that in Revelation 20, 11 through 15. Believers in Jesus are judged at the time of salvation, since Christ's righteousness is imputed to us and our names are written in the Lamb's book of life. You can read that in Revelation 21:27. At that time, the only judgment Christians will face is one where Jesus determines our rewards, not our punishment. So, today, what must you do to be saved? See, Felix wanted to wait. He would go away and come back, go away and come back. I'm fine right now. I'll come back and see you later. Out of curiosity. Maybe Paul will quit talking about that righteousness. Quit talking about that self-control and that day of judgment. Stop that. I wished he'd talk about something else. Let's talk about those other people and whether they're right or wrong. Quit talking about that stuff. But to be saved, you can't put that off. Yeah, it's the ABCs, simple. Ask, believe, and confess. And so, like, what must you do to be lost? Absolutely nothing. You just put it off another day. How many stories do you hear about somebody that was just almost ready to confess and decided not to because they thought that they were too lost, or they thought that they were good enough to get to heaven? They did, for some reason, they didn't want to say that prayer, and then they died. Well, you don't get second chances once that happened. Once you quit breathing, your time is over on that. Psalms 4, 1 through 8 today, Psalm of David, is really good with this. Verse 1 says, "Answer me when I call to you, O God who declares me innocent. Free me from my troubles. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer." That's what we're talking about. The passionate prayer of a repentant person will be one that will take you to heaven. It's not the tears that's cried, because you know what? Some of those tears are regret from being caught. It's not regret from the sin you did. There's passion in David's cry. There's passion in all of this. He's not uttering mindlessly. He needs God's attention right now. How many times do you need God's attention right now? I need it all the time. He calls upon the God who made him righteous. Spurgeon notes that a common habit of David was to plead past mercies as a ground for present favor. See, David is great in his conversation with the Father, and Paul is speaking the ministry, the gospel, to the people all around him, because he's filled with the Spirit, and his only mission on earth is to spread that gospel. I hope you have a great day today. I'm just so glad that you joined me, and Lori will be here tomorrow, and I will see you Monday.